When you know that you are queer, but your favorite drink is beer, that's gayish. You can bottom without stopping, but you can't stand going shopping, that's gayish. Oh, gayish, you're probably gayish. Well, life's just too short for narrow stereotypes, so it's gayish. We're also gayish. It's Gayish with Mike and Kyle.
Hello, everyone in the podcast universe. This is Gayish.
The podcast that has hope for a better future, but only because I have cookies at home.
Oh. Carbs are the hope of the future.
Carbs are our children of the future. Wait.
I'm Mike Johnson.
I'm Kyle Getz.
We're here to bridge the gap between sexuality and actuality. And today, I'm so fancy.
Why are you so fancy, Mike?
I'm basically like in business casual today.
I know. Yeah, you came prepared. You're official.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Jews.
Oh, you're not going to. You're just saying that you're dressed in fancy clothes, and that's it.
I was at a fraternity conference this weekend, and I'm very much dressed in my frat attire. So if you want to see what frat daddy looks like, this is it. This is.
You can't. If you want to see what it looks like, you can't. We have no way of you doing that.
Yep. Enjoy.
There you go. But you can hear the suit in your voice.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. How were your makeup parties this weekend?
I didn't make out.
Oh, okay, so they were good. Hey everyone, Mike had a lot of fun with his makeout and tickle parties. I get it. That's fine. I expected that to show up in your Gayest and Straightest, not up top.
Yeah, it will. We're going to talk about Jews.
We're going to talk about Jews.
But first,
I
assume we're talking about Jews. We could be talking about Judaism. I think we're going to talk to our guest about the appropriateness of using that word, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have a guest on to talk about being queer and Jewish, so excited to talk to her about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, here's the news.
Shut your mouth hole, it's time for your ear holes. News.
News the first. This is a clusterfuck that I just don't know how to untangle.
Okay.
Okay. A dude and this chick are they have a daughter.
Okay.
Then they divorce and he comes out and gets remarried, this time to a dude. The girl is now 10. The ex-wife and his daughter moved from California to the state of Arizona, and the mom enrolled her in a religious school without his knowledge or consent. He and his husband moved to Arizona to be closer to her, and the two of them, apparently, he and his husband, were chased off campus and told that they were unwelcome because of their sexual orientation. They say that they were threatened. We're going to go over what happened, and we can weigh in on whether that constitutes a threat or not. But Don Williams and Jose Ortega told The Advocate that Heart Cry, a Christian academy in Queen Creek, informed them.
Heart Cry. Damn.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. Heart Cry.
Yeah. Jesus died and my heart cried.
Yeah.
And then I named a school after it.
Yeah. I need to have a good heart cry, or I would if I had a heart. I think I'm dead inside now.
Yeah.
But Pastor Billy Van Camp, in late January, when they arrived at the school to pick up his daughter, Van Camp told them they were not welcome on school property and said, "Parents send their children here to keep them safe from gay people."
Fuck you.
Ortega asked Van Camp if he was threatening him. Van Camp allegedly responded, "Try me."
What a dumb... Try me, bro. Shut the fuck up. I fucking hate this guy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. He's an evil fuckface dickbag asshole.
Try me.
Yeah.
I'll start using that in my day-to-day conversations when it's unwarranted. How are you doing? Try me.
According to the East Valley Tribune, in 2011, Van Camp, the head dickbag, saw that there was a photo of a lesbian couple in the Queen Creek High School yearbook. He threatened to remove his kids from the school because they were exposing them to objectionable materials. That didn't go anywhere, so he said, "Fine, fuck it," and started his own school.
Damn. I mean, okay. He's an asshole, but he's got resolve.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? If I actually did something about half of my beliefs, I would be a much better person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just messy. It's really messy. There are all of these.
How is it? That doesn't seem very messy to me. That seems pretty straightforward. It just seems like people were. A Christian school is shitty to gays, just like they do.
Right. That's true. And what do you do from there? Right. Like I assume that this guy has no like legal ability to change what school his daughter goes to. A lot of this, he's worried about how this is impacting his daughter's feelings about her father. He said, quote, "I'm fine with my ex-wife's religion, but not that she found a school that is entirely against me and my husband. I honestly believe she did that on purpose." He believes that his daughter is being poisoned against him and his husband by his ex-wife's influence. And apparently his ex-mother-in-law said that they're living in sin and it's been confusing for the daughter. Quote, "To her, it's confusing knowing that she loves us and I'm her father, yet there's a negative influence from the other side." So the ex-wife has primary custody, gets to choose where the daughter goes to school, and it's a big old messy situation. That's the mess. The backbone of the story of just like, bigots were bigots to people that don't need to be bigoted against. That's true. Yeah. That's what happened. Anyway, news the second.
Yeah, you look like a newscaster right now. I'm having a very. It's very odd that you're dressed, that you have a suit jacket on while we record.
Sorry.
No, do what you want. It's just,
Yeah. I do what I want, Kyle.
Sure, but you can't blame me for one time out of 320 episodes you wear a suit jacket that I'm a little thrown off.
Yeah. Be as thrown off as you want to be. Because this is happening.
I'm in it. It's happened. It's already happened.
I don't know if this is going to come through. I'm going to play it. That is a video of a woman at the Central Park Zoo screaming at Sam Smith, who is walking by casually. She's saying, quote, "You belong in hell. Sam Smith belongs in hell. You demonic, twisted, sick bastard. Leave the kids alone, you sick fucker. Sam Smith is a pedophile. You sick motherfucker. Sam Smith, you are evil." Damn. So
Sam Smith is not doing jack shit to your kids. If you want your shitty kids to not watch Sam Smith, turn off the fucking TV. You are raising your kids. I am not raising your kids. Sam Smith isn't raising your kids. If you want to treat your shitty kids like little shitty kids, turn off the TV and take them to your dumb private university that treats people like shit. That's not my problem. You are not my problem. You can't fucking yell at people.
Yeah. I mean, you can if you have a podcast.
You can yell at people on your own podcast on your explicit feed. That's where you can yell at people. Get a fucking podcast, lady. You can yell whatever shit you want at Sam Smith.
Yep. I guess technically she can yell at him. It's a free country. Them. She can yell at them because it's a free country. And
no, you can't.
But
you can't yell at people. You can't yell obscenities at people whenever you want. That's like harassment or something.
Should be. I don't know if it is. Anyway, at the end of the clip, there's someone else, not the loud woman, but yells out and calls them a groomer, which there's that word. Woke groomer is like, again, these meaningless things that have reached the level of just, if I don't like it, I call it that.
Yeah, I heard Republican lawmakers saying this word. The problem is it does mean something, or it has in the past, and it's useful to understand how pedophiles attack their victims and treat their victims. It's a very useful, important way to understand real pedophilia.
Yeah.
And to water this word down with just anyone you don't like enables actual pedophiles, because then we don't understand what it really means. It's really frustrating that the people that think they care about pedophiles are not actually targeting or doing anything to help actual pedophiles and child molesters. They're just lobbing insults at people they don't like who are doing nothing but walking through the zoo.
Yep. Absolutely.
Man, I'm angry today.
Good. I'm glad we did it. News the last.
I didn't let you tell much. Is that I just kind of yelled for the entire news story.
That's it. I think the other part of it, though, and we've talked about it off and on, is just I think shit is real bad right now. Yeah. And I thought it was bad during the Trump administration, but it has gotten worse, not better, in the conduct of people, the way that they feel empowered and emboldened to just be absolutely fucking ridiculous to our community.
Yeah.
And it is really, really scary. And I think I I believe in my heart that I'm preparing in my heart for it to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
I think that this is an extinction burst. They know that we have won. They're going to go out kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
And kicking and screaming they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
News the last. This is adorable. A Girl Scout.
Thank you. I need this.
A Girl Scout from Glendale, California, was trying to figure out how to sell a shitload of Girl Scout cookies because it's Girl Scout cookie time, and went to WeHo and sold about 100 boxes in a weekend. It says per weekend, so she's gone more than once. But her name is Sienna. Quote, Sienna is participating in a cookie sale to earn money to support Girl Scouts, and we thought, what better place to sell cookies than in WeHo?
Sure.
We were here last weekend. A guy named Adam said he ate through all his boxes. He came back this weekend and said, are you going to pay for my Weight Watchers? I told him that I'm a hypnotherapist, so if he ever wants to cut back on the sweets, to call me. That's Sienna's mom. This is her aunt, I think. Anyway, said, quote, I was dreading selling Girl Scout cookies, but the gays have made it so much fun that now I'm happy to drive 40 minutes to sell cookies.
Aww.
We were so excited that drag queen Billy bought the last 4 boxes of lemon ups so mom could go home and relax with a glass of wine. It's interesting too because people are they're being hysterical, like we just said, about children being exposed to LGBTQ plus culture, including drag queens. But apparently Sienna is down.
Yeah.
Like the little girl gives 0 fucks.
Yeah. We're the ones that's actually helping and supporting kids. Like that's.
She did say apparently her first weekend in WeHo, quote, Mom, why are there so many naked people?
Well, honey, when 2 men love each other, they have to show it by wearing jockstraps.
Yep. There's some adorable pictures of her selling cookies and to the gays that I don't think are going to actually eat them.
Well, that's part of like it's interesting. Our bonus episode for this month is chocolate, and we talked about the like. Is it a gay stereotype or not? I had the same thing. Like, I think it's one of those like overdone or overstated things. Like you see all the insta-gays that don't eat any kind of food or like are jacked, and it's like the rest of us are like, no, like cookies are good.
Cookies are good.
And I'm going to eat them, and I'm not going to have a 6-pack, but like that's life, you know?
Deal with it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the news.
If you want to get access to our bonus episode about chocolate, you can join our Patreon. I want to thank the following new Patreon member, Soul Spotlight on You, Olderico Sarmiento. The R and the
Nailed
N seemed, I was like, why does this M keep going? And it's because there was an R before it. Olderico Sarmiento, probably. Maybe I got close on that one.
I think yes. It's great. If that's not your name, change it to that.
If that's not your name, you're wrong. And this podcast has now made it official. If you want me to fuck up your name, maybe, or get it right. Who knows? Go to patreon.com/Gayish podcast. We do bonus segments every week, bonus episodes every month, bonus mom splainings every month. We give away merch and merch discounts and lots of stuff available all there. Check out the tiers and benefits and joys of being a Patreon member.
Do it. You want to talk about Jews?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So I have a friend who's a fraternity brother, a gay fraternity brother who listens to the show, who's Jewish, and we had a little bit of a chat this weekend when I was in Chicago for the fraternity conference, and he said something that I thought was really, really interesting. He said Orthodox Jews hate him more than they hate me, meaning Mike Johnson, because Scott's his name. My friend Scott,
Hi, Scott,
is Jewish and gay, and Orthodox Jews hate that. But they don't care about me because I'm not Jewish. So it's like that whole thing about like what's worse than hatred? Indifference. They give 0 fucks about me because I'm not Jewish, but they hate his guts because he's Jewish and doing it wrong. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, Orthodox is I had to, like, I do not understand the denominations. I barely understand the denominations of Christianity, much less of Judaism. So
okay, Christians don't either.
So Orthodox is one of the most conservative. Interestingly, conservative Judaism is they have multiple opinions about like whether they accept or don't. Like that's one that is more kind of individual things groups are allowed to decide. Reform is the largest denomination within North America, and they're down with gays.
Okay. Great.
So
down with is maybe vague. Like,
okay. In 1977, this is not what I was going to talk about, but I have this written down. 1977, the Reform's principal body adopted a resolution calling for an end to discrimination against gays and lesbians. In 2003, they updated to include trans and bisexual people. In 2015, the Reform movement issued a resolution expressing support for trans rights. Months later, the conservative movement, which it's interesting, like Orthodox is more conservative than conservative Judaism, so that's weird. Anyway, months later, in 2015, months after the Reform did it, conservative movement issued a similar resolution in support of trans rights. So they have really tangible, their leadership has tangible evidence that they support gays all the way back to the 70s.
That's cool.
So yeah. But you know, this is the stuff I'm reading about, but how does it feel in the community? You know, how widespread? That's what we're going to talk about with Rachael, who is the executive director of the Jewish Queer Youth.
JQY.
JQY.
We keep seeing it as JQY in places, which...
JQYouth.org.
I can't figure out which is harder to say, Jewish Queer Youth or JQY.
We love a mouthful. The thing I actually wanted to talk about.
Okay, great.
I'm so glad you rarely do you have a question that I can give you some dates and answers on.
Well, I'm going to trust but verify.
Mike, I read. No, why don't you believe me? Well, I don't believe your news stories.
Great. You shouldn't.
Yes, I should. I should trust you to be able to read the news.
Yeah.
Okay, this seems like a bigger issue that we need to explore at a different point in time. Pew's 2014. Pew. Great. U.S. religious landscape study. They surveyed people to ask them about their religion and their political, social beliefs, a bunch of shit. So for Christians. Again, this is the background. I'm not Christian, but I grew up around Christians, so that's what I know of. And they're the ones that are fucking attacking our community in the U.S. So So 44% of Christians either favor or strongly favor same-sex marriage.
Okay.
48%. This is back in 2014, so that's the most their latest survey. 48% oppose or strongly oppose.
That seems like a lot, but okay.
That's a lot. Yeah. I mean, I think the world has gotten, or U.S. has gotten less religious and more accepting. So hopefully that's moved in the right direction since then. But
in 2015 was a Obergefell, and that's after that. And we know that a Obergefell impacted acceptance of gay marriage after it came into effect.
Yep. So that was 44% of Christians favor or strongly favor. 77% of Jews favor or strongly favor same-sex marriage.
Okay.
And 18% oppose or strongly oppose.
Great.
So in my mind, I just put all religion into a big category of religion.
And they all suck?
Yeah. I mean, I put religion in this big category of I don't believe in any of it. And I think it is often used to attack our communities. I was surprised at the how different the support is in this survey of Jews versus Christians.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I don't know. I didn't expect that because maybe I have the same sort of guilt by association of being a religion. But
yeah,
it's interesting. It also matches my personal experience. We don't have a lot of Jewish people in Seattle, and I don't have a lot of Jewish friends, but I do have a lot of fraternity brothers and acquaintances that I've had contact with over the years, and they all seem pretty chill about most things. So,
do you have Christian friends that are against it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, mostly from high school because of where I grew up, and I don't know. I'm friends with people I shouldn't be, just out of historical reasons or something.
Yeah. Huh. Well, that's at least some of the foundational kind of info that I thought was useful to understand. But we're going to talk more with our guest, Rachael, for you all, in mere moments.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. And when we get back, we're going to talk to Rachael Fried. Do you want to take a break?
Let's take a break.
Break.
This is the part where Mike and Kyle take a break.
So are we back?
We're back.
We're back. We're here with Rachael Fried, who's the Executive Director of Jewish Queer Youth. Rachael, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, super stoked that you're here.
Yeah. Where do we want to start? You are the Executive Director of Jewish Queer Youth. Can you tell us a little bit about what Jewish Queer Youth is and what their mission is?
Yes, I would love to. Our official name is JQY, which stands for Jewish Queer Youth, like you said. Our mission is that we support LGBTQ youth with a focus on those who come from Orthodox, Hasidic, and Sephardi Mizrahi Jewish homes. We're a mental health organization, so everything that we do comes from the lens of just making sure that each individual who comes to JQY is physically and emotionally healthy and well and can live their best lives. We have no agenda as to whether people stay part of their communities or leave their communities. Some people come to JQY because they love the Jewish upbringing and community and culture that they're a part of and want to stay part of it. And some people come because they hate it and don't want anything to do with it. And basically JQY is a place for all those people. So we have a drop-in center for teens in New York. We have a bunch of online virtual programming. We have a warm line that anyone can call to speak with a social worker at any time, and a bunch of other things. But I'll say that the reason we focus on those specific communities that I said, Orthodox, Hasidic, and Sephardi Mizrahi, is because those are the most likely to be rejecting of LGBTQ individuals and therefore need the most support. And also they have more sort of cultural competencies that are needed in order to work with them. So they often don't feel as understood going to a general queer space or even like a Jewish queer space.
There's a lot that you mentioned that I want to ask about, but one big thing is you mentioned that some, especially Orthodox Jewish people, don't feel accepted or understood in LGBT communities. I'm curious, what would you want LGBT communities to know? What's kind of missing from LGBT communities that makes it so they're not understood?
Yeah, I think there's sort of cultural competencies. It depends on what community we're talking about, but especially people who come from more ultra-Orthodox communities, there's a whole different language. Even, people will have Yiddish as their first language. Many places don't have access to internet. Sometimes even just the way that people dress, when they show up to an event or to a space that's not a Jewish space, and especially to a space that is a queer space. A lot of times people will sort of look like they don't fit in there and feel like they don't fit in. I think what's really interesting is that Orthodoxy and in general, traditional Judaism can be very, very gendered. And so there's a lot of unlearning that somebody has to do when they come out and they grew up in a certain community. There are certain things where, every queer person and probably every person in general has to unlearn a bunch of things that they learned from when they were younger and, question them. And as they get older, figure out, okay, what are the things that I believe in versus the things I was taught I must believe or have to be true, and maybe they're not really true.
Is this our BetterHelp ad, Kyle? We advertise for BetterHelp sometimes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, everyone needs some therapy.
Yes, always. I'm a big fan of therapy. Yes, I think that there's a ton of unlearning that has to be done. So people come to JQY and they've never heard of pronouns before, and they feel like they are in the wrong body, or they feel like they are attracted to someone that is the same gender as them, and they thought they were the only person in the world who felt that way until they come to JQY, and then there's a room of people that all thought they were the only ones like them. So even like little cultural things like that, of just understanding that not everybody knows what a pronoun is or has any of the language to talk about queer things in a non-offensive way, but not actually trying to be offensive. I think those kind of things really play a big part. And then there's also just understanding the community that they come from. So I think what is important to know is that it's easy to assume based on how people look that they are a certain way. And even in the most open-minded space, I think especially in queer spaces, that there's a lot of sort of negative feelings towards religion or towards religious looking people, which is an understandable thing because religion has been used against queer people for a very long time in in really harmful ways. And also there are people who look like they come from a very harmful religion, and maybe that person would even be a person who would use their religion against you, but really they're also a queer person and you just wouldn't know it unless you spoke to them.
Yeah.
You mean queer people judge people based on how they look? How dare you? There's no way that's true.
I mean, if they didn't, we wouldn't have a show. So, you know,
that's true, yeah.
no, I mean, these are some of the things we talk about. Sometimes you come out and you are, you know, we say we're accepting and loving, but you get a lot of judgment based on what you look like if you don't fit into certain things that we do. Like there's a whole second layer of judgment and
Your body type, your gender presentation, your skin color, I mean, there's lots of, but I can't imagine being in like what I think of a Hasidic Jew looks like, going and rolling into an average like cis white gay bar. That I can't imagine that going well. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah. I think, yeah. I also think that it's important to remember that just because somebody comes out doesn't mean that they have all the knowledge and history and understanding of what it means to be a queer person. So we talk about this a lot at JQY because most people who come to JQY have come from Orthodox school or Jewish. They have a huge amount of Jewish knowledge of, you know, all of the text and the history and the culture and all of the stories that come with it. And then when somebody comes out, queerness might be just as much a part of their identity as their Jewishness is, and yet they have no context for the history, the culture, the language, and all of those things. I think it's something that I have this dream of like building a crash course in queer history specifically for populations that have no idea, like wouldn't know the name Harvey Milk.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, to a certain extent, the Jewish tradition is millennia, right, of well documented, written down shit that we don't have that for gays. Our history has been largely invisible or erased. For
I know we gotta get on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned your understanding that people's assumptions about religion, seeing someone who looks religious, they can bring a lot of judgments. I think for me personally, because of growing up in Texas, because of growing up in the US, a lot of my assumptions and the judgments I'm bringing are based on Christianity. So Christianity is also, I think that's very fair given the Christian population are the ones attacking the LGBT community. They're the ones that are a majority in the US and have more of the power. So I'm curious, what kinds of things would you want someone like me who's viewing this from a Christian lens, like what kind of things would you want me to know about that to kind of separate out Judaism from that kind of just big religion bucket?
One of the things that's really fascinating to me about Judaism is that so much of it is cultural and about sort of like the social parts of the religion. So there are many times where certain things will be, it will be, somebody will say, this being queer is against Torah values. Torah is what the Hebrew word for the Old Testament. And the truth is that like, actually it doesn't really say that in there in the Torah, and it doesn't really have any, like there's two lines in there and they apply to a really small percentage of the LGBTQ plus community. And it's much more about the culture and the social parts of Judaism than it is about the actual text and what's written, even though Judaism is a very textual based religion. So I think that part is super fascinating and worth discussing, that it's mostly a social thing, or like there's a lot of fears about how the community is going to view you or your family and how this is going to impact other parts of the community. And it's not as much about the individual person doing something that is like a sin.
Yeah.
There's a ton of concern around dating in the Jewish world, and anything this is kind of like Fiddler on the Roof-esque if you've seen that.
Sunrise,
anything
sunset.
Right, exactly. Anything that somebody has in a family that's like relatively taboo affects the other siblings, because when two people get married, their families also come together, and there's a lot of concern about, well, if there's a gay kid in the family or queer or trans or non-binary kid and they're out and the parents are accepting of it, or they're out and the parents are not accepting, it doesn't matter. The fact that that person has a sibling who is out means that they will have a harder time finding a match for themselves.
Wow.
Or that the parent will have a harder time finding a match for that other sibling. So I think those kinds of things matter actually more than what like the religion officially says.
Interesting. That seems like such a great positive thing. The idea of your family is really meaningful, bringing families together. Like that idea is great. But then when you're queer, that's another added layer of pressure and potential for rejection. It seems like that can go both ways then.
Yeah, totally. It's like in Orthodoxy specifically, the sort of ideal is get married in the whatever quote unquote norm, man and woman get married, have many kids, and that's like the way to thrive in Orthodox community. And as people get older, if they're not married, they become what's known as older singles. And older singles have it's just more complicated in the community. They don't have as high a status. Nobody really says it out loud, but it's kind of a known thing that if somebody who's 20 years old and married is more a part of the community than somebody who's 40 and single. And I think that that's true for straight people specifically. When we're talking about queer people, there's sort of more acceptance within Orthodoxy of people who are, I'm going to say specifically gay and single. And there's kind of like, okay, we can like tolerate them here. We can even accept, I don't know, celebrate, but we can accept them here. And as that person gets closer to getting married, if they want to, having a family, they then sort of become farther away from the community, which is the opposite of the way that it goes for straight people. Because then it's like, we can't really ignore it as much anymore. When you're by yourself, we can just think, okay, you're just like a person who has all your own struggles and whatever else, all your own things to deal with. And once you're partnered, it becomes more complicated.
Yeah.
For queer people specifically.
I saw things that discussed kind of separating out the feeling like the same-sex attraction versus the action, and that those two can be viewed very differently. Is that part of this separation here?
I think so. Yeah. I think Jewish law talks a lot about actions and behaviors specifically, and not at all about identity. So it doesn't matter if you identify as a kind person, like Jewish law doesn't care about that at all. It cares more about, okay, did you give charity? Do you speak badly about other people? Do you cheat others in business interactions? Or all these things are like actual commandments in the Torah, like things that you have to do that are kind to other people. But nobody cares if you feel like you're a kind person or if you identify as that. And I think that the same thing is true of queerness. Like there are specific laws, and there is like Leviticus 18:22 that's the famous sentence.
Clobber verse,
yeah. The classic sentence about a man not lying with another man. There's also a sentence about men not wearing women's clothing. And then there's another one about like not changing your body. Right. So those last two sort of apply to trans and non-binary conversations. And those three things are very specific to the actions that people do and not about identities. So as we know, a person can be trans identifying and not change anything about their bodies or dress in any different way. And it's their identity. It doesn't have anything necessarily to do with their expression. And I think the same thing is true of gay identity or any sexual orientation, where there is no word really for identity in the Jewish law. It's just like, do you do this thing or you don't do this thing? And so I think like the sentence specifically doesn't talk about women. It doesn't talk about people who are asexual. Like there are so many different identities that are part of our community that are not at all mentioned. And even if there is an action that's associated with an identity, it doesn't necessarily apply, or it does apply. And also there are tons of rules about sex for cis straight people that nobody checks in on them about, and yet they're still like fully part of the community in every way possible. So I think that, it is interesting that the identity versus what I would call like description or behavior.
Yeah. It's interesting that I think of that in Christianity as people using certain lines from the Bible and being like, no, this is wrong. And then it's like, okay, how many other things are you taking literally to that degree? Like, I think queer people get treated unfairly with some of those verses. And it sounds like you're saying there's a similar thing going on. Like some of these verses may be used unfairly and disproportionately for queer people when they may not use other verses in a similar literal manner.
Yeah. And I think even beyond that, like a cis woman who, like, I'm not included in that Leviticus sentence and I'm treated as if I am. And that makes me really mad because then it's like, I might as well have been in there. But the fact that you treat me like I am, it's like this type of erasure that really is quite offensive. And I think that yes, totally what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Judeo-Christian world seems super interested in like penises and what they're doing, and that's the focus for whatever reason. You mentioned being a cis woman. Can you talk a little bit about your background, your identity, where you come from, how you ended up at JQY?
Yes, totally. Yeah. So I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in a tiny Orthodox community. Which actually doesn't exist anymore, but
wait, it doesn't. The town doesn't exist anymore.
The town exists. The Orthodox community there does not exist.
Oh, okay.
Anymore. Apologies.
Okay, no worries.
So I went to like a tiny private Jewish day school. There were like 10 kids in my grade.
Wow.
Yeah. For high school, I went to Yeshiva University High School for Girls, which is in Queens, New York. So I boarded at somebody's house in Queens to go there. In general, I am very much a part of the Yeshiva University world. So Yeshiva University is the flagship modern Orthodox institution in the US. I also went to college there. It's kind of like Brigham Young is to the Mormon community, as YU is to the Orthodox Jewish community. So I went to actually YU for 12 years from high school all the way through grad school. I studied in Israel for a year and a half after high school and basically was really a part of this like modern Orthodox world in, I would say, like the New York area. Mm-hmm. The first time that I realized that I was probably gay was when I was in my second year in Israel. And somebody asked my teacher, Rabbi, what do we do when somebody's gay? And in that moment, I kind of knew that question applied to me more than it did to other people in the room, but I didn't fully, it wasn't at my like a conscious level yet fully, but I kind of knew deep down. And the rabbi's answer was, and I'll use the Hebrew word for us, but he said, we have Rahmanis on them, which means like we pity them. And I decided in that moment, like, that's not me. I'm never going to be that pitied person. Yeah. And so I kind of just for many, many years was like, I'm not part of that group, that pitied group. And so for many years, I kind of just brushed it under the rug, which obviously didn't work super well. And then, sort of fast forward to my college years, towards the end of my time at Stern College, which is the Yeshiva University Yeshiva University Stern College for Women. I sort of could no longer like keep that part of me under the rug anymore. And so I sort of came out to somebody, and then it was like terrifying. And then it was at a time where most people that I knew didn't know any gay people specifically. There weren't like queer characters on TV like there are now. So there weren't even like fake, maybe there was Will and Grace at the time, but or maybe, Ross's ex-wife from Friends, but there weren't. And she was kind of this like weird side character that I think that people just didn't know how to respond. And it was not their fault that they didn't know how to respond. And also it crushed me every time. I was the president of student council. So I was like super involved in community on campus, and also had this feeling of, if I actually told these people who I really was, then they would not accept me, or like I wouldn't be able to be this person in the community. So I tried really hard to not be gay. I went on what's called shidduch dates, which is like it's kind of like blind dating. Like a friend will match you, or a friend or someone who sort of like professionally is a matchmaker will match you up with somebody of the opposite gender, and you'll go on dates with them. And after a few dates, you have to sort of decide if you want to be more serious and sort of get rid of the matchmaker part of the conversation. So I went on a bunch of dates with many different men, all of whom were, or most of whom were really lovely people. They fit all of the criteria that I had on my piece of paper of like, I want a boy who is, I don't know, X, Y, and Z, whatever was on my list. And they would like check off all the boxes and they were lovely people. And I would come back and just like really hate myself after, because I knew that it was something that was like, quote unquote, wrong with me and not them. And it wasn't that I would just like wasn't meeting the right person. It was something else. Yeah, so yeah. I really struggled for a long time. My coming out process was years and years long. It was not one of those, I was not one of those people where I like realized I was gay and then within a few weeks told everybody and was out. Like I was out up to one person and then I went back into the closet and then I came out to this person. And so I got involved in JQY actually originally as a participant. So JQY used to be a focus much more on young adults. And it was sort of like a peer-led support group once a month in the JCC in Manhattan. And so I went to a support group and found that I was like one of two cis women in the room, one of two non-cis men in the room, right? So it was like 40 cis dudes and me and one other person. And I was just like, it can't be the case that I mustered up the courage to come to this place that is both queer and Orthodox, and I still feel like it's not a place for me, or like I don't belong here. And so I got involved pretty quickly as a volunteer, and I started what was at the time called JQY Women's Programming, women's with an asterisk, and a whole sentence explaining what that meant. And then I kind of just like my role snowballed very quickly. I'm a graphic designer and an artist at heart. So I was like, all right, this website looks like it's from the 90s. So we've got to redo the website and the logo. And okay, we need to make this look more official. And so that's kind of how I got involved. Like first a participant and then a volunteer and then just a really fancy volunteer. And then I was like, I'm going to make this my job. So I did freelance graphic design on the side to pay my rent, but I really worked hard to make it so that JQY was an organization that really deserved to be bigger. The community needed more support than it was getting. And so that's sort of how I got involved. I was never officially hired. I kind of just took it. And and yeah, now we're our budget is $1.5 million. We have 7 full-time staff and still growing rapidly.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, we talked about the layers of like you come out and then you still might not be accepted by the queer community. And then you even went to the next step to be involved in a queer Jewish community. You're like, wait, I still like that feels frustrating to me even hearing that you like, you didn't, how did you create your space? And now you're the executive director. So what you're doing is working. How did you create your own space?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought of it as like me creating the resources that I didn't get to have when I was younger, but needed anyway. And me sort of being the role model that I needed to have, that I didn't really see anybody like me when I was younger and I really needed to. So that's kind of the way that I looked at it. The other side of that, like I could have looked and sometimes I do feel bad where it's like, I wish I had that. And it's annoying to me that I didn't have somebody before me who did this instead of me. And also, it's really cool that people get to have this now. And I only got to be this person because there are people before me who made the space so that I could then make this space. So I always think about, sort of the generation, the giants whose shoulders we stand on, right? And the like, I'm not the founder of JQY. I consider myself a builder, but not the founder. But my colleague, whose name is Mordechai, he started JQY in 2001. It was the first JQY meeting. And it's only because he started JQY, which was then mostly cis men, that I got to step in and say, okay, well, you did this, but I'm going to take it further. And, people, hopefully people, and people really are doing this, come after me and after the other people who come after me and say, like, okay, now that you did this, I'm going to champion X, Y, and Z, because it's sort of like almost a privilege to be able to have this conversation because the people before me set it up so that I could do that. I think about this a lot. I don't know if you're going to appreciate this analogy or not, and it's maybe a little controversial, but I think about this in terms of corporate pride. So when I was growing up in New York, when I went to college in New York, there were no, like during Pride Month, there were no rainbows everywhere. It was just like a regular month, and sort of like watched more and more rainbows pop up every June. And now my office is in Times Square, and when I go into Times Square every June, there's like rainbows everywhere, and I kind of love it. Yeah. And I'm like, this is amazing that there are all these businesses, that are putting up their flags of support and whatever else they're doing. And then there's the people who say, like, they're using our celebration in order to, to profit on us, and they don't really mean it. And I kind of feel like you're lucky that you get to say that, because you didn't have the rainbows, because to you it's obvious that there would be rainbows, and now you can fight against it. Whereas for me, I kind of just like loved that there were rainbows and didn't even really care why. So I don't know if it's a perfect analogy, but I think about it a lot in that way. And I appreciate when businesses do much more than just put a rainbow in their window. And I also love seeing rainbows everywhere in June.
Yeah, I definitely get that. And also I think what is the root underlying goal? Is it our community? And, we know that they're there to make money. So I think what's the most important is people like you working at organizations, like the root goal is to support Jewish queer youth, like that you don't have any deeper, it's not about money, it's about the actual support. So I think those foundational kind of groups are so important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a difficult, we don't charge any money to any of our participants. I think we have a full-time psychologist who does free sessions with queer Jewish youth, and we just, most of our participants are not out to their parents, and so even if they have health insurance, or even if their parents could be the wealthiest people in the world, and it won't matter because they don't have access to any of those funds or any access to transportation to sneak out of their house to come to our programming. So a lot of organizations sort of fundraise through like the parents of their participants or communities and we just don't have that. So it's definitely, I forgot exactly how we got here, but anyway, it's noteworthy.
I'm super interested. Where does all that money come from? So, like somebody's bankrolling this. What does that look like?
Yeah. There are a few different foundations that we get funding from. So specifically, there are Jewish institutions and funders that fund most of our budget, I would say. We also have many community members who are alumni of JQY who contribute as they can. Sometimes it's more, sometimes less. But it could be, we have people who give $3 a month to JQY, and a ton of our budget comes from many, many people giving very small amounts of money, which is really, I think is a cool thing that we have that. But it's also interesting, like it wasn't always popular even for the more liberal foundations or funders to fund queer initiatives in the Jewish world, I think, because the donors tend to be people who are older and more traditional. And so even like 5 or 6 years ago, it was kind of taboo to be supporting an organization like JQY. And, as time goes on now, it's less and less controversial. And in fact, there are a lot of different studies that show that COVID had a very negative impact on the mental health of queer youth specifically. Yeah. And there's actually a Jewish community COVID impact study that says that that also applies to Jewish youth, which is not surprising that, these statistics apply in all different kinds of communities. So there's now this kind of movement of like, okay, we know that this population is struggling more than others. And so there's actually more of a proactive push now to fund places like JQY, which I'm not grateful that COVID had such a harsh impact on this population, and I am grateful that it enabled us to get more support, more funding to be able to support more people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on the other side of the coin, there seems to be this big push, especially in not real protection, but people thinking they're protecting young people. Like young queer people seem to be really a source of, unfortunately, debate and attack in the U.S. I'm curious, do you get any, and you're working with people that are particularly anti-LGBT, like, do you get any pushback or challenges or people, like, because you're working with youth?
Yes, totally.
And what does that look like then? How does that come through to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of complicated parts to that. I will say our target age range is 13 to 23. So some of our participants are minors. So that's its own complicated really complicated space. Yeah. And in New York City, there are laws that protect queer minors. You are allowed to treat minors in New York City if they would feel unsafe coming out, talking to a parent about whatever that thing is. And there are a few things that fall under that category, but queerness is one of them in New York City. That kind of thing is different in every state. So we're actually working with lawyers to, make official policies, and it's a pretty complicated thing. There's also, I believe it's the LGBT Center in New York that has sort of like an open door policy. Like, we are here and our doors are open. And if however you get here, we don't ask, but we're just here when you do come. So that, I think, is also sort of like a loophole. But yeah, there is a lot of conversation around, well, these people are really young. How do you know? You're poisoning their minds. You're making them this way.
Groomers.
Influencing them. Yeah, all that. It's particularly noteworthy. I don't know if you're following this, but there's a big lawsuit going on right now with Yeshiva University versus many of the queer students at Yeshiva University.
Did they just shut down all student organizations?
They did, yeah. There's the whole thing going on with it. Right, the students they sued for discrimination because they weren't allowed to have a club, and the students won in the first court and the second court in New York, and now YU just appealed to the third court. And if the students win in the third court, which the assumption is that they will, it then goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. So there's like it's a big topic of conversation now in the Orthodox community, more than it has been before, because YU has really, I guess this is the hill they're willing to die on, apparently, much more than I had thought it would be. And I think it's brought out interesting things in the Orthodox community. There are a lot of people who probably wouldn't call themselves allies, but are just kind of like, why doesn't YU just let them have their pizza? Like, they're just trying to gather and have a book club and a movie night with pizza type of thing. And it's sort of bringing out a little more people that maybe wouldn't have thought about this issue as much beforehand are now sort of forced to think about it in a different way. And some people who probably never would have supported the queer youth at Yeshiva University are kind of just like, why would this be the thing that they bring to SCOTUS? It seems like really dramatic.
Yeah. It's super interesting. This is the hill that they will die on, I think is fascinating. But I imagine there's got to be, the world is changing so quickly. There's got to be a lot of sort of existential dread in communities that are, not on the same path as everybody else. We talk about it all the time. Like the right wing in this country is freaking out because they know that the world is changing and it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it's really threatening to groups that value certain, or not even value, that are like so used to certain traditional things. And in Orthodoxy, as I said before, everything is so gendered. So there are laws about like men cannot touch women that they're not married or related to. And the whole system is threatened once you have somebody who presents in a more masculine way but identifies as a woman, and who are they allowed to touch versus not touch.
Yeah.
Or like the rules are about attraction, and so if you're not attracted to the gender that you're not supposed to touch, doesn't matter if you touch them. Like there's all kinds of things. There's separate seating in prayer spaces and just a lot of things that are threatened, I think, by acknowledging that LGBTQ individuals are real and like can be celebrated and wonderful people with happy things in their lives. I think that really threatens the system much more than people are willing to admit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other big thing, there seems to be growing both anti-trans and anti-gender non-conforming kind of pushback and anti-Semitism that seems to be connected. Like you see these at, drag race protests, there are also people who are like neo-Nazis. These two things seem to be happening, at least to me, in tandem. And I'm curious what you see on your side with the kids that are affected or just with the organization.
Yeah, there is a rise in queerphobia and anti-Semitism in the US right now. And so we're super aware of that at JQY and are constantly figuring out ways to be safe and secure and also make sure that we are the most welcoming place possible to people who need us. So that it's a really complicated line to balance. Like, how do we make somebody feel like so welcome when they arrive and also have security at the same time to keep people safe? And so, what does that look like? So that's definitely part of the conversation now. There is definitely a rise in anti-Semitism on college campuses, which is a big point of a big conversation topic at JQY. And I think that what's really interesting, and not to get so political here, and I'll also say JQY is, we have no, we always say that support is not contingent upon belief. So we take no political stances on things, and we really just support everybody in whatever beliefs they have. There's a Jewish concept called Elu ve'elu, which means both these and those. And it means that there can be simultaneous conflicting truths that are true at the same time. And that's kind of like our philosophy that we live by. So without taking any political stances and getting too into this, Israel is a really hot topic on college campuses. And I also would say in the queer community specifically. So this definitely, it comes up a lot. There is, the best example I can give is in New York every year, it's usually at the end of May, there is a Celebrate Israel parade, which is like the gathering place for Orthodox institutions. It's like, the entire, I think, Fifth Avenue is closed off, and it is a parade that has floats and music. And when I was growing up, it was like, I was excited to go to the parade because it was everybody that I knew from camp and every school I ever went to. And it was basically like a big reunion day. And that was the reason I was excited to go, not because I had any feeling about Israel necessarily at the time, or if I did, that was totally secondary. So there was a time where queer groups were not allowed to march in the Israel parade, which was like 10 years ago, not that long ago. And JQY was instrumental in getting queer groups to be able to march in the parade, right? With a banner that says the LGBTQ community. And many people found out about JQY and then end up using our resources because they saw us at the Israel parade specifically. So it's a really, really good advertising opportunity because it's where the entire Orthodox community is on that one Sunday towards the summer. And we march in that parade. We have, this is where you can meet us if you want to march with us. We also tell people this is where you can go if you would like to safely protest the parade, and you can go there and be part of JQY. You can be in the parade and part of JQY, and all of those things are, equally celebrated and supported. And also in the group that protests the parade, there are some right-wing Jewish protesters who have super homophobic and transphobic signs that are really, really harmful and just really negative. And a few years ago, there is a group that is an anti-Zionist group that is called JVP, which stands for Jewish Voices for Peace, who infiltrated our group specifically because they were protesting the fact that there was a queer group marching in the Israel parade, because queer people should be, because of all the they didn't protest the parade in general. They protested specifically the JQY group in the parade, and they they marched with us pretending that they were part of the group, and then they at some point took off their shirts and had underneath it had their own shirts on and formed a human chain and got arrested in front of our kids, and it was a whole big to do and also really terrifying.
Yeah.
And it was this interesting, we're protested by both the left and the right in the same parade, which is really fascinating. It just is and it's there's a different expectation of us because we're queer and Jewish. And we also weren't so we weren't allowed to be in the parade. And when we finally were allowed to be in the parade, then it's a protest of how could you be in this parade? Right. So there's all kinds of, we just have it from all sides, I would say. And I'd like to think that if everybody is mad at us, that means we're doing something right. But it's definitely complicated.
Wow. They went undercover. That is some deep planning undercover shit. That's terrifying. That sounds so scary.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. It was, so a lot of our kids ended up running, and it was a really, it was quite scary. And yes, it was obviously thought through and planned. Also, we're a youth group, which is just target someone else who's not as vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's really what it was more about for me.
Yeah.
Pick on somebody that's your own age, or it's also marching down this. If you can imagine, it's the epitome of coming out to the entire community, marching wearing a rainbow on your shirt through thousands of people who were at part of your synagogue and your camp and your school and your elementary school. It's just it's already so courageous for somebody to even just put on that shirt and walk down the street, and then to be protested. It was so it's just really terrible. And then there's the fact that it's a big Jewish gathering. So the amount of security, because it's a target in and of itself to have a huge parade full of thousands of Jewish people in one area in New York City together. So there's a lot of targets.
Yeah.
And then sorry, just to add one more thing to that, there's also a whole big thing about having a Jewish star on a pride flag, because the Jewish star looks too much like a flag of Israel, which there is a Jewish star on the Israeli flag. And also it is a star that represents the religion and not necessarily country. This is again, getting a little political, but there's a lot of talk about banning the Jewish star from pride parades and from pride gatherings, and that is also problematic in a whole different way.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. Any last words of wisdom for us? Things that people should know.
I will just say, I think it's important to note, I just want to, bring this home again, that there are many denominations of Judaism that are more accepting than the ones that we talked about today. And it's also, people will assume that JQI is so niche and say, how could it be possible that you have an organization that works specifically with queer youth from these specific communities? And it's actually not that niche when you look at the numbers. So I think it's really important to be aware that there are thousands of Orthodox queer youth just in New York City, let alone the entire US and the entire world. And I'm sure that there are, interestingly, our youth can relate to many other queer youth of faith-based communities. And so I think that these are people that we need to be thinking about much more than we are. And that it is, I believe that it is my responsibility and our responsibility as a community to be looking for those who are most vulnerable, who have really no voice and are falling through the cracks, and make sure that those people are supported. So I'll leave it at that, but just how important it is, and how I actually think that the more niche something is, the more important it is, and the more likely that those people are being overlooked.
And well, then I'll also ask for, if there is an Orthodox Jewish person who's queer listening, like, what do you want them to know? What do you want these youth to know?
The main thing is just that you're not alone. Like I thought I was the only one like me, and so many people who come to JQI think that they were the only ones like them in the whole world. And there is a whole community, and it's an awesome community, and a community that you can be proud to be part of, and that will welcome you with open arms when you are ready. So just to keep that in mind and know that.
I love that.
I love that too. So did we do it?
We did some stuff.
We did some stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think we need to these need to be ongoing conversations and things that I will now know and bring into future discussions whenever, Judaism or, things come up in the news or what have you. So, I think it was a great step, and I learned a lot. So
Yeah. Awesome. So should we take a break?
let's take a break.
Let's take a break.
This is the part where Mike and Kyle take a break.
Let's do it.
So are we back?
We're back.
We're back.
We're going to do our Gayest and Straightest.
We're going to do our Gayest and Straightest. But first, Rachael Fried, where can people find out more about you, about JQY? Tell us all the things.
All the things. All right. So jqy.org is the first place I would start. We have a JQY app, so that can be found in the App Store and on Google Play. And that's a really cool resource. It's a global Jewish queer community and network. We have virtual programming. We also have micro grants for any college student who's doing any kind of Jewish queer event, basically anywhere in the world. So check out our website if you're interested in doing some kind of Jewish queer college event, and let us help you fund it. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Jewish Queer Youth. And we have a really cool event coming up, which is there's the holiday of Purim coming up on March 6th. And it's kind of like Jewish Halloween. It's like the holiday where you are supposed to dress up and drink and party and eat. And so it's an amazing holiday in general, but we have the most awesome queer Jewish Purim party. It's in New York City. So if you're in the New York area, check it out. If you're not in the New York area, follow us anyway. And hopefully we'll bring JQY. We're working on national expansion. So if you're looking for JQY in your city, also feel free to reach out and let us know. But anyway, jqy.org. You'll find everything there and on social media at Jewish Queer Youth.
Awesome.
So awesome. Thank you. Well, our website is gayishpodcast.com.
We are on social media at Gayish Podcast.
Our hotline, you can send us text messages or leave us voicemails, especially if it's for Momsplaining, which we're going to be recording here coming up soon. It's 5855-GAYISH. That's 585-542-9474. Standard rates apply.
Yeah, leave a voicemail with your question for Ma Johnson.
Yeah.
Our email is gayishpodcast@gmail.com.
And our physical mailing address is Post Office Box 19882, Seattle, Washington, 98109. Really, really quickly, just reminding everybody that we are going to be at the Tree Fort Music Festival in Boise, Idaho. That's coming up at the end of March, which I'm only harassing you about it now in case you need to get your travel plans. But that will be Friday, March the 24th.
And it's an amazing festival. There's music, there's drag, there's comedy, there's tons of other things to go to. So it'd be worth making a little trip to if you want to see us and other stuff.
You ready for our Gayest and Straightest?
Yeah, let's do our Gayest and Straightest.
I'll go first.
Great.
So I went to a fraternity conference. I was in Chicago all weekend at a fraternity conference, and the gayest thing about me is that I just assumed everyone was gay. Like if they were, even if they were a little bit gay, I just presumed that they were gay. And my gaydar was so wrong. It was so wrong. There were several of the fraternity brothers that I just was certain, and then they would show me pictures of their wives or their fiancés. I was like, oh, I need to recalibrate or something. Anyway, but just the presumption that everybody that I thought was even a little bit gay, I just was like, oh, gay family.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
The straightest thing about me at that conference with a couple of straight bros, I've had a full-on conversation about Climate Pledge Arena and that the Seattle Kraken plays there and that the Seattle Supersonics used to play there before they moved to Oklahoma City. And hopefully we get a basketball team back soon. It was, oh my God, who was I? All the sports ball.
I stopped Do I go now? I stopped listening when you mentioned some kind of arena.
Yeah, I should have too. How about you, Kyle?
My gayest is I went to the dentist and I was in the waiting room and I opened up Twitter and boy, was there porn on it. And I was like, ew. Like, I don't follow porn accounts. It's that y'all dirty fuckers like porn stuff and then it shows up on my feed. That's fine. I support all of that. But now I was just like, oh, I can't open Twitter at the dentist's office. My straightest is on the way over here. I ran out of creamer. Usually I put in a little vanilla or lately hazelnut creamer. I was out of creamer, so I just had some black coffee.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like a man, a dude.
They'll put hair on your chest, as my dad used to say.
God, I always hate it whenever I had an uncle that said that. And I was like, I don't want that. How do I opt out of that? Rachel, what about your gayest and straightest?
All right. My gayest, I ended up playing a board game, Settlers of Catan, with 3 friends until like 3 a.m. and we ended up sharing revisiting our coming out stories over wine and a board game for like hours and hours, which felt pretty gay to me.
Yes.
Very nice.
And the other gayest thing I did this week was spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to figure out the straightest thing I did this week, which I gotta say is really difficult. I don't know if this is so straight or not, but I did the New York Times crossword puzzle every day this week.
Oh,
I feel like,
wow.
Yeah,
it's kind of gay also. I don't know.
No, I get it though. Like, I think queer people have better shit to do.
I just think of
it was on the commute, if that helps. I was just sitting on a train anyway.
I just think of someone like at the breakfast table opening up the paper and it's just like, I'm living my normal straight life. I could very much see that as a straight thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It came across as a little straight to me. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, Rachael Fried, thank you so much for being here and talking with us today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Other people are our super gap bridgers. Thank you so much for your support. Andrew Bugby, Christopher M., John Crowley, Stephen Porch, Yost Total, Harry Shaw, Josh Copeland, Jonathan Montanus, Forrest Nail, Patrick Martin, James Barrow, Steve Douglas, Explosive Lasagna, Michael Cubbington, Just Jamie, Kevin Henderson, Thomas B., Timothy Sora.
Hey.
Welcome. Dusty Sands, A. Coleman, Chris Cacciatorians, and Jerome York.
Well, that's it. This has been Gayish from the Chris Cacciatorian Studios. I'm Mike Johnson.
I'm Kyle Getz. Until next week, be butch, be fabulous, be you.
See you next week.
See you next week. I just had the thought, this is Gayish?
This is Gayish.
I don't know if we're supposed to use that word or not, but
you can. A few people thought that gayish was a combination between gay and Jewish, and so it kind of sounds like a Jewish queer podcast.
Wow! Oh no!
I had to explain. It's not a Jewish podcast.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, for this one
but
episode,
Gayish is better actually.
I really want someone to start that podcast now.